Thank you for joining me today. What we're going to be talking about today is Agile transformations with lean change. And it's based on Chapter 7 from our latest book, our Executive's Guide to Disciplined Agile. And I should say that the content of this talk today isn't disciplined Agile per se. What it's about is a change management approach that we use to help organizations move from a traditional approach or their current approach to disciplined Agile. So it's we've decided to use an approach based on lean change, which is an Agile way of implementing Agile. It's worked very well for us in the past. And in Chapter 7 of our book, the Executive Guide, we actually do share that with you, exactly how we work with companies to help them move to disciplined Agile. So let's jump right in. All right, so just a little advertisement here. Most of you should be aware that we are running our inaugural Disciplined Agile virtual conference, which we're very excited about, for May 15th. Lots of people have signed up already. We have a great lineup, and the format is we've got a series of 15-minute, so short presentations from a number of people, a number of different industries, lots of different people who are using Disciplined Agile. We also finished the day with a panel. We have some great panelists lined up from 4 different companies that have implemented Disciplined Agile, so they'll be sharing their stories. And we're also, at the end of the day, very excited to be announcing an upcoming DA product that's going to be available to members in good standing, which will help you to consume and use and reference Disciplined Agile in a way you haven't been able to in the past. So we're very excited to be doing a demonstration of that product at the end of the day, May 15th. So join up. It's only, it's $50 for members for the entire day, and it's a great way to get all your education certification credits in one shot. So check it out. You can find out more information on the consortium website. Okay, so as we've said in past presentations, I won't bore you by talking about the tractor analogy that we've talked about in the past, beyond just sort of a reminder that we're getting really good at building high-performance Agile teams, and we think of those as engines. But we've said in the past that often these great engines, these great Scrum, XP teams, Lean teams, sit inside an organizational tractor, and we can't understand why we're not going fast, right? So what we really need to do is to be able to, create high-performance race cars as organizations. And you've seen us talk about previously, and we talked about in our latest book, that Disciplined Agile delivery, or the high-performance engines, is just part of it. That book talks about, our first book talks about optimizing individuals and teams, right? But there's more to it than that. We have to optimize for DevOps, for the IT department, and indeed the entire enterprise. So the key message here is we need to optimize the whole. We need to optimize the system. And this is what we talk about. This is what we mean when we talk about transformation. And what we see a lot of organizations do is they don't, while they call it transformations, what they're really doing is adoption. And what you see here is the Disciplined Agile IT blowing up. You've probably seen this workflow before, but in the center, in the white box, is DAD. And you see many organizations rolling out Scrum-based Agile life cycles, Lean-based Agile, and that's where their focus is. They think that that's what it means to become Agile. Well, not really. That's just adoption. So what about all these other areas that we need to work with? What about release management and operations and HR? What about PMOs, governance, enterprise architecture? We need to optimize those as well, right? And that's what transformation is really about. And in Disciplined Agile for the enterprise, we take it up a level. What about these things? We also need to optimize them as well. So people management, I talked about HR, definitely need to work with those folks. We need to work with control, continuous improvement, finance, procurement, budgeting, all these areas, and product management. Okay, so to really, to get started here, a lot of people confuse adoption with transformation. They are two different things. You need to do both, right? And as well, team coaches, it amazes me. A lot of people now, they start with Scrum Masters, and all of a sudden they're calling themselves coaches. And now we're seeing team coaches all of a sudden calling themselves enterprise coaches. And what we often see is that these enterprise coaches really have no experience working outside individual agile and lean teams. So I would suggest to you that being an enterprise coach requires some maturity, some experience, and understanding with how to work with all levels of the organization, both on business and IT. It's really, it's a completely different skill set than just teaching agile teams. When you're considering a transformation, we'd encourage you to think about setting up a center of excellence. We've used this pattern in the past. A group of people like myself, working with a group of people inside an organization who are responsible for spreading the word and coordinating your transformation work. And what I'm going to be talking about today is exactly how we do that. And we know that team leads, Scrum Masters are one of their primary jobs is to be servant leaders and to remove impediments to increase the skills for individual teams. What I would suggest to you as an enterprise coaches, take it up a level, and they are like servant leaders to the team leads and to the teams, and help to grease the skids and remove any organizational impediments to those agile teams. And as I said, we use mean change as our organizational change management method. It's an approach that works for us to make small, non-disruptive, sustainable changes over time. Now, when you see a picture on a slide that shows a cover of our book, what it means is that the picture on the slide comes from the book. And we have this picture in the book, which talks about, soup to nuts, top to bottom, the kinds of things we do to help people move towards this kind of agile. And at the top, you see transformation, which takes a long time, and I will talk about timelines shortly. And then adoption. And what we typically start with in the adoption area is an assessment. We'll go into an organization, spend 3 to 5 days. We hear stories about 6-week assessments, which we actually don't think is necessary. We can find out very quickly in a very short period of time what the current status is and lay out a roadmap for moving towards this agile. And after the assessment, then we move into some executive training, and I'm going to be talking about some of these other things shortly. And then, so it's in our approach, it's sort of a top down and bottom up at the same time. So we'd also be doing some team coaching and incrementally adding agile teams. Start with some training, and then get them through an inception, and then take them through a number of iterations of construction. And then after, we can incrementally overlap these and ramp up the teams. And we get this is showing 3 teams, but we can do it very, very quickly actually. And the focus of this talk really is on the transformation side, the stuff that happens at the top. Now, it is a multi-year process. This is something we always need to set this expectation with our organizations that, it takes years. And they sometimes push back to us and say, well, no, Mark, we need to have the 3-month plan. We have on our KPIs that we're going to be agile by Q3. Sorry, it's not going to happen. So as you can see here, we'll be doing some training where it makes sense, just in time. And we're going to introduce changes to the organization via what we call experiments. And I will explain that shortly, what I mean by that. We'll want to ramp up communities of practice or guilds. And we're going to talk about COEs and COPs shortly. And then a center of excellence. Now, a thing I'll point out to you with the center of excellence is you notice here that it doesn't continue on and on. We view a DA or transformation center of excellence to be a temporary thing, to do the sort of transformative change that is typically required for a lot of traditional organizations. But after those hard things have been done, then we move more into a continuous improvement mode versus a transformative stage. And just different types of work that's going to be happening. We'll do some executive education, very, very important to get the executives on the same page. And they themselves will require some executive coaching as well. Management, one of the things I've learned over the years is not to ignore middle management. And in this top-down and bottom-up scenario, what can happen is that the people in the middle are often ignored. And I myself have been guilty of that as I learned about how to do this. They really feel uncertain when they see teams being redesigned and wondering whether there really is a role for them in the organization. So just a lesson learned, make sure that you bring middle management into the discussions very, very early. We do have a one-day Discipline Agile for Managers course that's become very popular that helps managers understand how to lead in a new Agile world. So we introduce Agile pilots. We'll do some delivery team coaching, some IT, like enterprise architecture, IT group coaching, business coachings. There'll be some skills training and communication. Lots of communication up front. I'll talk more about communication later. You'll want to have Agile champions and sponsors. They, external to the team, they can help support and promote the change. They can help accelerate Agile transformation into the organization. Without executive sponsorship, it's very unlikely that your adoption will succeed. I'm very conscious when I go into an organization to make sure right at the C level that they're all on board with sort of what business agility needs and the kind of support that we're going to need from them in order to be successful. In fact, next week I have a meeting with the C-level executives of one of our newest clients to help explain to them what is coming and ask for their support, which I expect to get. And also recommend, you should have definitely a product owner as part of your transformation initiative. I know in my work when I go in, I can't afford to go in full time, obviously, so I'll go in and help them out. Their internal product owner will prioritize the work that needs to be done, and we can carry on the work while I'm gone until I come back again. It's really important to have that point that the person responsible for prioritizing the priorities and the transformation work that follows. You probably will have seen this, the continuous improvement process blade, and I'm not going to spend a bunch of time going through all the different options on the right-hand side, but I will spend a bit of attention is talking about communities of practice and communities of excellence, centers of excellence, pardon me, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between those two things and why you probably want to have them. So we'll talk about it right now. A lot of people get these things confused. A center of excellence is typically staffed full-time by experts. That's their job. They come in every day and they spend all day in the center of excellence. Our recommendation is that they do not need to be long-term. They can be temporary. And they ensure the consistency of approach and messaging across the organization. So if we're going to institutionalize, socialize, discipline Agile, or Agile practices, they're responsible for that. They provide leadership, and they purposely disseminate information about what's going on and why. And this is typically where your enterprise and team coaches would work, is within that center of excellence. Whereas a community of practice, or what Spotify calls a guild, they are typically part-time responsibility. It's staffed by actual practitioners, and often is guided by the center of excellence. In a client I was working with last year, our center of excellence, we prioritized which communities of practices that we wanted to create and helped get them started, help them organize, invite the right people, and get that going and roll out your guilds incrementally. They're typically long-term because we're talking about continuous improvement of different kinds of disciplines, like in the area of coaching or automated testing or architecture. And they share learnings and experiences and learn from each other. And their goal is to improve their collective craft over time. So you can call them COPs, you can call them guilds. And so I just got a message to turn down the speaker volume. Am I speaking too loud?
No, Mark, it's causing a little bit of feedback, but if you turn down your speaker volume, it should fix it.
Thank you. All right. And let me know if it's any better. There's these terms, community practice and guilds. And as I said, Spotify uses the term guilds. I really like the term guild. Communities of practice in many organizations, they have a history and maybe of bad experiences of not being particularly effective. And guild is some sort of a cool phrase. And I kind of like it because it goes back to the medieval days of blacksmiths and stuff. where they truly cared about the craft and you were wanting to improve their craft. So apparently the feedback's not better. But yeah, I'm going to turn my volume right down. Keep me posted as to whether or not it's getting any better. You know what? Maybe I'll put on my headphones. You know. Talk amongst yourselves. How's this? Any better? Ooh, sounds like it's better. Okay, so community of practice. Yeah, I was saying that I like the term guilds because it reminds me of the medieval times when it was about improving your craft. And there's a sort of a coolness factor to it. And in fact, the last couple of companies I've worked with, they are calling their COPs guilds. But if you study guilds, you know that it was also about protection of the knowledge. And of course, that's not what we want with your guilds. You want to share the knowledge, but you pick a term that makes sense for you. All right. I took a picture of this. This is one of our clients. They actually had pods set up for their Center of Excellence. So you see here, they've got Discipline Agile Center of Excellence combined with their continuous improvement group. They also have a lean initiative underway. So it's one group. And they also have a continuous integration and Discipline Agile delivery pods as well. So I thought that was pretty cool. I took a picture of it. You'll definitely want to invest in some coaching. Coaches bring experiences from many different organizations. You know, any good coach has made their share of mistakes in the past, and you bring them on board so that they won't make those mistakes again, right? So that your success assurance, your likelihood of success assurance is improved. All right, now let's get into the change management aspect of transformations. And, you know, Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You know, this is hard. People are continually trying to change the culture of organizations, and it's incredibly difficult. What we want to do with transformations is build high performance, motivated teams. We want to optimize our enterprise groups, maybe create some center of excellence, and incorporate some agile governance, maybe get some alignment with your HR, people, operations, organization, just types of changes, right? And these goals require culture change, and you cannot force people to change. Short term, you can maybe dictate change, but organizations are like rubber bands. They tend to spring back to where they were before, unless you truly do change the culture. And change must be negotiated. You cannot dictate change. You need to convince the change recipients that the change is good for them and have them buy into it, or it's just not going to stick. As soon as you're gone, they're going to go back to what they were doing before. Let's make sure, yeah. So there's some great work on change management out there already, right? John Cotter talks about 8-step change, and you want to build a need for urgency, get your guiding team to steer the change, get a vision, get buy-in, make sure you're empowered, get some short-term wins, and stick to it and make those changes stick, right? So really good advice for change management. But, you know, regardless of this good advice, change initiatives typically fail. And you can see on the right-hand side here, an epic fail. The average success rate of change initiatives, 34% according to Standish Group. Reasons are lack of structured change management process. People aren't using a disciplined approach to change management. Humans are irrational. And one of the biggest concerns I have is that they treat the change initiatives as linear process initiatives, you know, waterfall projects to roll out Agile. Doesn't make any sense at all. Managing change requires a feedback-driven approach, not plan-driven. And so we need to use an Agile lean approach to our change. So the solution in our mind is to use both a structured approach, a disciplined approach, as well as a feedback-based Agile approach. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with lean change and the work of Jason Little, Jeff Anderson when he was with Deloitte, and some other people.
but some really good ideas here. So you can find out more at leanchange.org. I know Jason runs Lean Change workshops. So just a shout out to Jason and Jeff for their work on Lean Change here. So what we want to do is, when we get started, one of the critical things is to make sure that you get your executive on the same page. They need to understand what's coming, why we're doing it. A lot of what has been done in organizations and has been considered best practices for years just frankly isn't best practice anymore. Things like big project-based approaches with big business cases, annual budgeting processes, a lot of assembling teams for initiative, and then when the initiative is over, disband the team and resource them against another initiative. Those kinds of things we thought made sense, and they just absolutely do not make any sense anymore. So I consider it part of my job, and any enterprise coach, is to educate the executives first and foremost about more modern based approaches, and get them on the same page with regard to the vision of what we're trying to accomplish, as well as help make sure that they understand some guiding principles. And I'm going to share with you what I mean by guiding principles. So this is the kind of work we do at the beginning of any typical transformation effort. And we use several big visible charts or information radiators to help communicate our vision and progress against it. So I'm going to focus on the top part of this here. This is a change canvas. There are many different kinds of change canvases, and you can have different categories, but it's a great way to put sort of a vision on one page. You'll see on the top left-hand side here, the urgency. Why are we doing this? Below that, the commitment. What kind of investment are we going to make in this change initiative? Because it does require an investment. And right in the middle, what is our vision? What are the key things that we really need to address here? For some companies, it's their IT isn't delivering dependably. They're making promises, they're not keeping the promises. Maybe they have quality issues. Maybe the cycle time for delivery is not good. Maybe there's high attrition in the organization and poor morale. Every company is slightly different, right? So talk about what the vision is, talk about what the urgency is. On the top right, we talk about change recipients. We need to think about who's going to be the recipients of the change, because we're going to need to work with them and bring them on side as we negotiate the changes with them. So that was the vision, information radiator. And by the way, that vision, we like to post that in a public area. I know one of our clients who's going to be speaking at DA Day, what they did is they printed out the vision on a plotter and they put it out on the wall right outside the elevator. So as soon as people come off the elevator, they can see what this agile transformation thing's all about. And these are what I call guiding principles. And the things on the left that maybe we thought were best practices in the past, we're going to move from the left to the things on the right. And this also, I'll spend some time with the executive as part of the education process to explain to them why part-time allocation of resources, right? Slice and dice, spreading resources across multiple initiatives, which we used to think was a way to optimize the use of our resources. It's a phenomenally bad idea because of the context switching, a lack of focus, right? So, and the executives are smart people. They just haven't been told, they haven't been educated on a better way of doing things. So once we have that education, we get them to agree that the things on the right are better than things on the left, then that then becomes guiding principles. And I ask management to hold each other accountable. So principle number 3, large projects, we're going to move to small initiatives. When somebody says we need to start a $10 million initiative to do X, I want somebody raising their hand to say, hey, I thought we agreed that large projects typically fail. They're very risky and they're not agile. So can we break this thing down into something smaller, right? So this is really important to get executive to hold each other accountable to these guiding principles. And what we've got here is just an example of some guiding principles. All right, let's get into the change management technique. Now, this is from the Lean Change lifecycle. And what they talk about is insights. Insights are pain points or observations that we make that we might want to deal with. So an example might be, an insight might be our annual budgeting is not effective. Well, if our annual budgeting is not effective, what options do we have? What other things can we do? Well, we could move to continuous funding with rolling wave planning. So for insights are pain points, and options are maybe, and there may be several of them that we might want to pursue and try to see if we can make that pain point or insight go away. Another example might be our current bonus system encourages specialization and silo behavior over teamwork. So that might be an insight, right? That our current HR policies are not consistent with agile, good team collaboration. So maybe an option might be to consider team-based incentives over individual incentives. Examples of insights and options. For every option, then we want to consider a minimal viable change, some small change that we might want to introduce to see whether or not we can make the situation better. And for every change, we want to prepare for the change, introduce it, and then assess whether or not that change is a positive change. And if not, we can roll back to what we were doing before. We can pivot, go in a different direction, or try another minimal viable change or another option. You can see that this is very similar to our dad's exploratory life cycle, which is very similar to the lean startup, an experimental approach, in this case for change management. So a minimal viable change, an MVC, is a change that's small enough to be successful, but it balances disruption, because any change causes some level of disruption. It balances the level of disruption with the organizational value. So it breaks things down into very small changes. And they're treated as experiments. Now, contrast, and what we're going to be doing is typically several minimal viable changes at the same time. And one might be in the HR, one might be in finance, and one might be in enterprise architecture, one might be in the teams. It's contrast that to a waterfall approach where this month we're going to do agile governance, and next month we're going to deal with finance, and next month we're going to deal with the PMOs, right? So we think this is a much better way, because you've got all these little changes going on, and then several years into the transformation, the organization has changed substantially, but they didn't really feel it because of it's just these little changes, right? So agree on the reason for the change, negotiate with the change recipients. If they understand that the change that you're suggesting we introduce is an experiment, and then they will more likely come off their position. So if you go in and say, you know what, we don't think that spending a month writing business cases is really returning the value, because a lot of the parameters in the business case are really hard to predict, like costs and benefits. So we would suggest that we could spend that month, maybe cut it down to a week, and spend 3 weeks actually delivering value. And then after 3 weeks of work, we can then take a look at the business case to see whether or not we're on the right track. But we haven't wasted a month putting it together. So the point is that the recipient of the change, if they believe that if expected results are not realized, they can go back to what they were doing before, they're more likely to participate in the experiment, right? So for this reason, what we like to do when we introduce a minimal viable change is express it as a hypothesis to say, we expect this benefit if we introduce this change, so that we can actually assess objectively whether or not change is creating an improvement. So how do we organize our insights? When we do training, our workshops, we have these exercises to say, okay, so you've learned about Agile, you learned about discipline Agile. Tell me all the reasons why this couldn't work at this company. So it's a great opportunity for us to learn about from the people, the team members, the impediments that they see to successful adoption of Agile. Those help us to flesh out insights, things that organizational impediments, if you will. And that's so our workshops are a great starter to flesh out insights. So if you're going to run workshops, you might use the same approach. Find out what the pain points are, that becomes your initial insights. Then for every insight, what are our options to try and improve things? And then what we're going to do is we're going to prioritize those with our product owner, and we're going to prove which options and minimal viable changes we're going to introduce next, okay? So I've given you a few examples already. Here's another example. QA says they need more details to test from. Well, our options could be, and I'm not recommending these options, I'm just saying here's some. You could put more detail in use cases, probably wouldn't be my suggested approach. Supplement stories with screen mockups, more detail on acceptance criteria, or maybe QA is more collaborative and they participate in more of our conversations. And sales pitch for Dad is that we provide a rich set of options. So you don't have to sort of figure out all these things for yourselves. You can reference Dad and we'll give you some ideas for how you can actually attack some of these pain points. So having selected an option as an experiment, it's then moved into the improved or next backlog. Okay, so this would be sort of the next option that we are going to explore. And so what you see here is on the left-hand side, we've got sort of high-level insights, pain points, options to approach it, and little changes that we're going to introduce to fix the situation. When we're ready to deal with something, then we can pull it and put it onto a typical Kanban, however you want to set up your Kanban. But here's an example. I could have be scheduling work, a few weeks out and move it to the right as time passes, and then introduce it and go through the steps of preparing the change, introducing the change, and learning from it. And then deciding whether the change is going to stay, whether you're going to roll back or try something different, declare it done, right? Now, you could do this in Jira. I am not suggesting you do, but in situations where, like we've got lots of customers who have offices around the world, in India and Australia and US, etc. If you truly want to make this transparent, it kind of forces you to virtualize your board, but you certainly don't have to do this. But this also is showing this, it's easy to read, can't read my handwriting, and it shows an example of, what we have here is in Jira, we have an insights and options board. And I've got a column here for insights and options. I've chosen in this case to have it as one column. I could have it as separate columns. And then you see the next ones we plan to address and the ones that are currently in progress. So management can look at this and say, that transformation team, what are they working on right now? What do they think is the next priority? Okay, now what we've done here too is we've got swim lanes for the key objectives of the transformation to improve speed to market, adopt agile project management approaches, and increase quality. So if management says, what are we doing to improve our speed to market, they can very quickly see where we're focused and maybe change our priorities working with our product owner, right? So these goals, these vision goals, remember the change canvas and the vision column was right in the middle. So there is traceability between the vision and the actual work on the ground to fulfill the vision. Now, this is the second board. So the previous one I just showed you was used to prioritize the work. And this is the Kanban board to show the work in progress, right? So what you see here is a duplication of the first column. The minimal viable change is the change that's currently in progress from the previous board I just showed you. Now what we do is we take that option that we're going to introduce and we break it down into actual work. And it's a minimal viable change. And you'll see here it's expressed as a hypothesis. So we see project startup is too costly, takes too long. Well, here's a hypothesis. If we streamline inception, it will result in 50% reduction in startup cost and schedule. So let's try that. We will introduce it and then assess whether or not using a short inception phase is adequate to replace what we were currently doing in the past, right? So this is how we manage our daily work. But, I'm, again, not recommending you use Jira. Some clients like to use it. Some don't. And what you see here is an example of a manual board. You can absolutely do this manually. Nothing wrong with that at all. What you see on this is the orange stickies are insights, and the blue stickies are the options that are going to be used to address the insights. And I'm not going to read the slide, but just to let you know, be prepared to negotiate any kind of change that you're going to make. So if I were to say, hey, we're going to go and redesign all these teams and make them cross-functional teams, and they're going to be long-term, and they're going to be co-located. Some people, especially on the co-location, are likely to push back on it. So be prepared to negotiate the changes and be able to explain why you're recommending the changes. You need to come across with some credibility. Metrics design. Metrics is a topic of an entire different webinar, and if we haven't done one already, we probably should. I know we've done similar webinars in the past, but we're a big believer that we need to design the metrics that make sense for you and not just Google top 10 agile metrics. Because, we like to say if you have no metrics, you're flying blind. If you have too many metrics, you're flying blinded. So which metrics make sense for you? And we use a GQM, goal question metric approach, to design metrics. And you can see here that, and this is a picture from the book, is that some of the key goals in this example were to improve IT delivery predictability, response time, and quality. And then, okay, what kinds of questions do we want to ask that would help us assess whether or not we're getting better at those things? and then flush out candidate metrics. So this provides a very rigorous approach to flush out metrics that might make sense for you. That's typically part of any transformation. And, you know, I pulled this picture from one of our clients with permission, of course. And I love this picture because this was in the Center of Excellence office for the internal change champion and product owner, proxy product owner, if you will, for this organization. And I love what's on this board. What you see right in the middle is what we call a strategy board. And we've broken up the transformation into some of the key areas that they want to focus on, sort of agile governance and some HR principles, building effective teams, and product management was their key hot buttons. And then breaking down into the blue stickies, the other areas that we want to focus on. So there's sort of the 60,000 foot view of the areas we want to work on. You can see here, just to the right of that, we started to flush out some PMO metrics. And then on the right-hand side, we've got some of their moving away, moving from, and moving to ideas. And the bottom right, the different kind of radiator here, you could think about the changes you want to make and organizational barriers to the change, like who's going to fight the change or what, and the things that are supporting the change. It's a different kind of radiator you might want to use. And I see on this whiteboard here on the left-hand side, there was some doodling around different ways of designing workspace areas. So it's pretty cool. And anybody can walk in and ask questions about this. We held lean coffees around this so people could ask questions about how it would affect them. So your transformation is a journey, and it's not a destination, but once your sort of fundamental transformative work has been done, like maybe related to what I said previously, you've redesigned your teams, maybe you've changed alignment of who reports to what managers, you've done some co-location, you've set up some tooling, you've fired up some Scrum and some lean teams. Once you get going, you work with HR, you work with the PMO, finance, etc., right? Once that sort of transformative work is finished or is winding down, you start to roll into a continuous improvement, because continuous improvement really does continue, right? So we talk about this in the book, how we sort of morph into a continuous improvement mode. All right, now doing well, we're winding down here. I want to finish with some examples. Like there's, life in the trenches. There's nothing like real examples. So an example of a change, this organization wanted to redesign and co-locate their teams. At the bottom left here, you see a slide from our Discipline Agile for Managers course, and it shows how we want to move from developers reporting to managers of developers, and testers reporting to managers of testers, and then resourcing those people in a matrix style into a project. We want to move instead to managers of cross-functional teams, so testers and developers who report to the same person, and co-location, all that kind of stuff. So what you can see here in top right, this is a client where they're actually moving people around, creating teams. It's kind of fun stuff. Another example, maybe you want to get your plans out of MS Project and make them visible. This isn't so much transformation as maybe it's transformative for some companies, but it's more of an adoption thing. But, we want no hidden work, right? So your hypothesis might be that everybody has a better understanding of all work in progress if we visualize the work. And so here you have a project wall. Another example, organizations, a lot of them have these big upfront planning and requirements phases. Our hypothesis might be that we can, get some of that time back and non-value add work, if you will, and replace detailed project charters and requirements with, as an example, a 3-day inception phase, which is exactly what's going on here. Top right, you can see they're exploring their initial scope. They're using story mapping for that. And bottom left, they're identifying their initial technical strategy. So they've got, and all this is being done in parallel together as one team. It's kind of fun. Workspace Design is another client here. We started with the hand drawings on the left-hand side, got some formal drawings from a furniture place. Bottom left, you see sort of the prototype. They tried it with one pod initially, found it worked really well, rolled it out across the entire floor. And on the bottom right, you can see the actual workspace live working. And so parting thoughts is that we want to We want to communicate, right? Can't communicate enough. People are afraid of change. People are resistant to change, right? And what we need to do, one of the ways to make them feel better is let them know there's no secrets. Get everything out there on walls where they can see it. Let them know it's not a big, massive reorg exercise. And your transparency is really a critical success factor. We expect transparency from the project teams, and we should expect the same from ourselves. We should make everything we do transparent. And then information sharing, ideas, town hall meetings. One of our clients used a great approach of having a town hall meetings, and they had they had sort of one of their directors was interviewing team members from their initial Agile teams. They set up there on chairs at the front, and they asked them questions and compared the old to the new. It was a great way sort of to testify, if you will, the Agile teams and their positive experiences to everybody else who had not yet experienced it. Use radiators, wikis like compliments or whatever. Use lean coffees, just some communication ideas. You should have a product owner for your transformation, or at least a proxy to your executive group and to your entire group, actually, to help prioritize the work. And you absolutely need executive sponsorship. I've been very fortunate to have executive sponsorship at the highest level for the engagements that I've worked on, which has made all the difference in the world. And coach and mentor people over the long term, everyone at all levels of the organization, and it's not just IT. As I've learned in the past, I sometimes have ignored middle managers too long, and I've hopefully learned from that. The same applies to the business. They will not understand all this Agile crazy stuff that's going on in IT. It's not enough to have product owners. You need to, in fact, when we teach product owner training, we like to have the next level out. The people that the product owners themselves work with in the business, have them attend the product owner training so that they understand how this all works. Get some help from experienced enterprise coaches. Be very stringent and challenging when you bring in an enterprise coach to make sure they truly do have experience with references and case studies for how they've made a positive change in the past. And, pitch for our certification. Our CDACs, it's a very hard designation to get. There aren't very many of them right now by design. We take it very, very seriously. There is a DAC board review currently. Don't know how scalable that is, but right now for all new coaches, it's reviewed by the board. And we do check all references for applicants. So you can trust the CDAC definitely has good experience. And last reminder, once more, come to the conference. It's only $50. It's going to be a great day. I'm so pumped about it. I think there's going to be lots of great discussions. And you can see the agenda is up now on this from the Agile Consortium. So check it out. All right, right on time, 45 minutes in. So there's a whirlwind tour of how we do transformations using the lean change method, and it's worked very well for us in the past. You can see on the consortium website, there are some case studies. And as I said, at the DA Day, we will have some people on the panel who have lived through this, and come ask them some hard questions. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions you have about what's worked for them and challenges that they had along the way. All right. Questions. Do we have some questions?
Mark, I'm currently not showing any questions, but if anybody has a question, you can ask it using the Q&A feature or the chat feature.
Okay, Ron, I'm not hearing you. I see your lips moving.
Oh.
Is it my problem?
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Oh, Mark, we turned down your speakers.
And you can hear Mark. You can hear you. I suspect it's because I swapped I went to the handset. Do I dare unplug it? I do have one. You can type your questions in, by the way, and I do see one right now. Derek asks, what strategies do you have to deal with an org with multiple business units and a single Agile team? Main issues are high work in process and prioritization across the business. That's a great question. And I may need to turn my speakers back up. I did already. Yeah, so multiple business units in a single Agile team. I mean, just like any Agile principle, we need to have a product owner for the Agile team. And often what that means is the product owner will need to work with representatives of the different business groups. So part of the work of a product owner is working outside the team, right, to try and coordinate the pipeline, the intake for what the priorities to the Agile team are. Now, interesting that you say main issues are high work in progress. Or certainly that is an issue, and I think that would be the product owner's responsibility to make sure that the work in progress is minimized, as well as the team lead, of course. But certainly I hope that you don't have any of the business units going directly to team members with work, because that's one of the great things about Agile is we have that conduit through the product owners to make sure that the team is focused and pulls work from one backlog and doesn't have competing priorities. Has the CDA exam been updated? Eric says, I don't think it's been updated very much recently. I'd be interested to understand why you're asking that question. But you can either ask again here or send a note to the consortium as to any concerns that you have. We will be updating the test, by the way, because right now the test is based on our first book, and for our first book, we actually did not have one of the goals we now have, which is to identify your initial test strategy. Because the tests are based on the first book, therefore we can't test it. But Scott and I are rapidly writing the update to the first book, and we're quite excited about it. We think it's going to be really good. And the tests will absolutely be updated to reflect the latest book coming out later this year. Andy asks, what do you see as challenges for cross-team dependencies? Yeah, always cross-team dependencies are, you try to avoid them as much as possible, not always easy, right? But we have technical dependencies and we have functional dependencies. And we would encourage your architecture owners, hopefully you've got architecture owners, to step outside the team and meet periodically to discuss the technical work, technical debt, those kinds of things across teams to help manage dependencies. It's a great question, actually, you know, because a lot of times you get into building something inside a team and you might have a technical dependency for work that has to be done by another team. And by the time you discover that, it's too late, and therefore you can't get your work done for the iteration, and the iteration fails. So just a reminder, those of you who've taken Discipline Agile training know this, that part of the architecture owner's responsibility is to go to do look-ahead design modeling, look down into the backlog, into your work item list, understand the technical approaches to your work, and understand when there is dependency outside the team on somebody else. If you don't do this look ahead, then you're going to discover too late. If you do it look ahead, you can see the dependency, then you can go talk to the other team and maybe adjust their priorities so that they can get it done earlier, so their work is done in time to satisfy your dependency. So the bottom line is to work outside the team. Architecture owners meeting together, product owners doing the same thing, getting outside the team, working together to talk about functional dependencies. What else do we have here? Any advice for a fully distributed organization where co-located teams are not an option? Yeah, not ideal, right? And that comes from Eduardo. And Jim said, Eduardo just asked my question. Yeah, you know, there's no silver bullets. And actually, I see some more feedback here. So suppose you have two teams divided between two locations. I recommend changing them into two co-located teams. Yes, but they say then they'll be missing needed skills. My answer, they'll learn, become more cross-functional. Anything to answer, Mark? Thanks, Jim. Yes, good answer. My first way to address those kinds of issues is to go to co-location. By the way, the same thing applies to dependencies. One of the best ways to avoid cross-team dependencies is to move the dependent work into the team. That therefore removing the dependency, so the team is now responsible for their own destiny. Regarding distributed organizations, Not a great option, but it's just a reality. So we have to figure out how to be as agile as we can in those kinds of situations. So if you could have completely dispersed, where you have some team members, let's say in India and some in North America, but it's less than ideal because chances are some people are going to be sleeping while the other people are working. A better approach is, I think, as it was suggested here, is that you have two teams, a team in India and a team in North America, minimize the dependencies between those teams, and that will make them more effective. But yeah, you can run into skills issues there. But that's probably the way you might want to look. Interestingly enough, if you are going to outsource, one thing you might want to look at is outsourcing north-south rather than east-west, if that's an option for you, because then you have people in the same time zone. And I've seen that work really, really, really well. How would you recommend ensuring a distributed team member feels, these are interesting questions. I'm not sure how much they're related to transformation, but that's okay. Ensure a distributed team member feels as part of the team. Lots of strategies there that we have in Discipline Agile. We recommend that team members get together physically once in a while. And this is similar to what SAFE would say as well, by the way. Because there's nothing like getting to meet the people that you work with every day. I know it's expensive, but just do it once a quarter or something, just so people can build relationships. I've seen lots of other ideas, like having cameras on in both locations all day long. So it's like they're working together, like a Google Hangout or something like that. My question was regards to the new text coming out. Sorry, Eric.
That was related to the test.
Any other questions? I think hopefully I answered your question. I think, Eric, you were asking about the exam. Anybody else? Maybe somebody can type in, how did you find the session? Was it worthwhile? Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Great. Interesting tips. Thumbs up. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yes, well worth the time. So I'm pretty passionate about this stuff, if you can't tell. I have, and we talk about it in our executive book at the end, and when we wrap up the book, we talk about every time we go into an organization, when we leave, everybody's happier. The teams are happier, executives are happier, management is happier, business is happier, everybody's happier. That's one of the reasons I love my job. But it takes time. So you have to set expectations. It's a multi-year effort. Do little changes. Try to, and by the way, I should just say that our approach is different than some other approaches. Like there's a large framework out there. I won't mention the name, but you guys can probably figure it out. There's a framework out there that really can be very disruptive. They basically say there's no component teams. Everything's a feature team. You need to turn your organization upside down, or don't even bother. That's not our approach. We don't go big bang. We have found that doing little changes over time can get you there. Now, if your business is in an emergency and you have no choice but to turn it upside down, okay, but understand that's a very risky approach to take, and that's just not our approach. So give it a shot. The Kanban boards and radiator examples are really helpful. Yeah, I'm going to try and do that in our webinars, just to use more real world examples rather than just killing you with PowerPoint. Okay, everyone, any more questions before we wrap it up? So Greg says, good to hear from you, Greg, and Jerry. Christoph, Mark, I'm in violent agreement with everything you presented. Thanks, Jerry. Carolyn says, yes, worthwhile. Great suggestions on dispersed teams. We live this every day. I know you do, Carolyn. Greg, good to see you, Greg. I suggest you lead more with the increase in happiness at all levels at an outcome of a discipline agile engagement. That's an outcome that's lacking in other comparable frameworks and transformation approaches, in my humble opinion. Agree. Couldn't agree with you more, Greg. Happiness is the key aspect of it. In our, by the way, in our Discipline Agile for Managers course, we do lean on those kinds of ideas from people like Jürgen, who stress the importance of happiness. Okay, thank you all for attending. Greatly appreciate it and your interest. and hope to see some of you at DA Day. If there's no more questions, I'm going to wrap it up and let you get back to your day. Thank you so much.